South Wales, May 6th, 2001. 31-year-old Jason Williams hasn't been seen for 12 days.
And he certainly would have been in touch at least by phone.
Police arrest 2 men, secure witnesses, and obtain damning DNA evidence. But this is no open and shut case.
There was no body.
Could Jason still be alive? With the police unable to find him, his family turned to a local psychic. But will the hard science of the police or supernatural skills find Jason first? Lahore, a quiet commuter town on the south coast of Wales. A person doesn't have to be missing for very long before somebody notices. Unemployed father Jason Williams has not been seen for 4 days. His sister Julie is worried by his lack of contact.
Jason was a very family-orientated person, very devoted to his son. He was very much a hands-on dad. He certainly would have been in touch at least by phone to speak to his son. So that was when the alarm bells first were raised.
Detective Chief Inspector Ken Isaac has lived and worked in the area for most of his life. An area where serious crime is extremely rare.
The missing person report in relation to Jason Williams commenced in the village of Lahore. There were general house-to-house investigations and speaking to his family and associates. So we expected from an early stage of the missing person inquiry that he would be found within a week or so.
Most missing persons in the UK are found within 3 days. After a week, the police still have no definite leads. The family grows desperate.
Leaving messages on his mobile phone for him. Obviously, every time the phone rings, you wonder, is it the police ringing with news?
But everybody kept an open mind that perhaps he's gone visiting somebody out of the area.
After 9 days and with little information from the police, Julie takes advice from a relative and contacts psychic Sue Evans to see if her worst fears are true.
Psychics have the ability to speak to spirit, so that if that missing person is dead, then psychics would be able to communicate with that dead spirit.
If she was a genuine article and could do what she said she could do, she might come up with a piece of information that would lead to finding him, so there wasn't any decision to make, really.
Right then.
Sue claims that tarot cards focus her psychic intuition and will allow her to discover what happened to Jason.
I use the tarot like some people use a crystal ball or tea leaves. And it's a way of me linking into their lives and finding out what's happened to them. To me, the tarot is how I communicate with spirit, as well as being able to predict.
Out of the 78 picture cards, Sue turns over the image that most strikes fear into those not familiar with the tarot, the death card.
The death card means change. Doesn't always mean death, but it does mean change. But because it's next to the moon, which indicates sadness to me, it does mean that there is sad changes around you. This is the Chariot, which means trauma. This is how you feel at the minute, as if everything has tumbled down around you, which is caused by all these preceding cards. And this is the 9 of swords, which indicates stress to come along with this. The cards did show us that there was trauma around Jason, but we weren't absolutely positive as to what had happened. But it does indicate that something has happened. So we'll have to remote view this if you want at a later stage.
Usually if people have, as she put it, gone over, she can pick them up fairly quickly. But I think you are always aware as well that there are charlatans out there that will prey on people's grief and make claims that are not true.
You know, it's not going to be cut and dried. It's one of those situations that it may take a while to get to the bottom of.
Sue says she can sense a disturbance around Jason, but is unable to contact him in the spirit world. This is a ray of hope to Julie that her brother may not be dead after all. 12 days after his disappearance, Sue tries to contact Jason again. She figures that where one psychic has failed, 2 will succeed. She calls upon her sister Kathleen.
We're asking Spirit to help us to find what happened to Jason.
Sue uses remote viewing, an unproven phenomenon that psychics claim allows them to witness events from a spirit's point of view.
We ask for protection and a gold light around us to help us work.
When I remote view, it's like watching a video or a television. You see details. You can see the layout of furniture, you can see the layout of rooms, you can pick up the atmosphere, which would lead up to a murder. You can then watch as if you're standing there as a witness.
Sue claims she is transported back to the murder scene with Jason as her spirit guide.
I found myself in a living room, and there was an older gentleman there and a younger gentleman, as well as Jason.
I see that there's a bit of agitation going on between Jason and the younger man.
What the psychic doesn't know is that her visions seem to match details revealed by a local man who has been brought in by police after claiming he witnessed the murder.
This started as a missing person investigation, and I always kept an open mind. Is this a missing person investigation, or is this a murder case?
Alan Sinfield says he was there when Jason was viciously attacked by 27-year-old Richard Davis.
Sinfield and Jason were friends. There was a vast age difference, some 20 years. What he told us is that they'd been drinking at his house. Davis and Williams had an argument over the fact that Davis saw Jodie Sinfield's telephone number in Jason Williams's phone.
All of a sudden it erupted like a balloon going pop. And there was a struggle.
Davis pulled Jason Williams onto the floor, straddled him.
And he was just sticking the knife in him in his chest and things in some kind of a vengeful, nasty way.
With no apparent knowledge of Sinfield's confession, Sue describes an older man and a younger man in the room with Jason, then a drunken murder. She has no doubts what this information is all about. Jason wants to ensure his killer is brought to justice.
There is an element of wanting justice done because somebody had taken his life.
It's 12 days since 31-year-old Jason Williams was last seen alive in Lochor, South Wales. This missing persons case takes a dramatic turn when a 57-year-old local man, Alan Sinfield, is interviewed by police.
This was turned into a murder investigation, primarily from the disclosure by Sinfield to the police saying that Richard Davis had killed Jason Williams, and he was a party to the disposal of his body.
For 24 hours, these details are not released even to Jason's family, yet somehow psychic Sue Evans' vision of the murder appears to match Sinfield's confession. The police remain open-minded over what has happened to Jason.
And we weren't sure at that stage, was he involved in the murder? Did he alone do the murder and blame Richard Davis? And they were things that we were hoping to clarify. Richard Davis was also arrested that night, and he was given an opportunity to give his version of events.
Davis protests his innocence and claims that although he had an argument with Jason, he left Sinfield's house with him still alive.
The interviewing officers felt it was a challenge, as if it was some type of game with him, or challenging the officers during each particular interview.
The police act fast and send in forensic teams to Sinfield's house. Now, both Ken Isaacs and Sue have terrible news to deliver.
One of the most difficult jobs for me was speaking to the family and telling them that he had been killed.
Initially, when we heard that he'd, been stabbed, it happened like probably 2 streets from where I lived. It was very strange to think that all that was going on in such a short distance from your home and you didn't know anything about it. We knew that these people had been charged with his murder, and I didn't feed that information to Sue, because if I did that, I would never be able to know whether she was genuine or not.
I have to tell you that I have been in contact with Jason's spirit. and I feel he has passed over. I'm sorry to have to tell you.
Sue tells Julie about her vision of Jason being in a room with two men and the drunken stabbing. Her details match the facts that the police have revealed to Julie earlier.
With regard to the information she's come up with, the accuracy of it, I can't logically tell you how she could come up with all those details.
Jason's spirit also seems to be providing Sue with more clues that could bring his killer to justice.
And Jason was pointing out that there would have been parts of the room splattered by the blood, and some had splattered onto a radiator.
With regard to the information she's come up with, the accuracy of it, I can't logically tell you how she could come up with all those details.
We need to see now what's happened to him since.
Julie is won over and approaches the police about working with the psychic, but they refuse the offer.
My take on the psychic involvement is that a psychic did not assist the investigation, and to my knowledge, Southwest Police has not used a psychic to help to prove any inquiry.
Yeah, I think, police have their hands tied by procedure, by budgets, by professional guidelines and standards. I mean, families are not tied by any of those things.
Frustrated by the police's response, Sue and Julie launch their own psychic hunt for the body, led by the spirit of Jason.
The key to any murder investigation is identifying where is the attack site and where is the body deposition site. We had an attack site, but we didn't initially have the body deposition site.
Without a body, the police could not be confident of convicting anyone for murder. At Sinfield's house, the forensic team have a breakthrough.
If we moved back the carpet, and we found there was two large pools of blood, and under the radiator were some small dots of blood.
Sue claims she predicted there would be blood close to a radiator. For her believers, this is proof that the psychic has access to the world of the paranormal. Psychometry is a controversial technique that supposedly allows seers to explore psychic imprints of objects touched by victims. Will this help Sue find Jason's body? She calls in her psychic troops.
Deep breath in.
We were asked to sit within the circle, and then I think a photograph and some things of Jason's, like a T-shirt, were passed around.
It helps when you have more people in circle, because each person's got a different psychic ability. So all these combined builds up the whole picture. So we saw that the body had been loaded into a van and taken up towards the Brecon Beacons. We saw the body being left very unceremoniously, but there was a tree that the branch of a tree had broke.
Are we anywhere near where your body is?
Jason showed us a Celtic cross. The unique thing about it is that he said there were 3 of these crosses.
And she said, this is near the spot where he was put.
I just keep saying it's so obvious. You're missing me.
Near there, that's where his body was.
South Wales, May 2001. The race to find the body of murder victim Jason Williams is on. Police detain 2 local men, Alan Sinfield and Richard Davis. Sinfield has pointed the finger at Davis, but he maintains his innocence. Whatever they say may be irrelevant. DCI Ken Isaac knows that without Jason's body, a murder conviction is practically impossible.
It was important for us to recover Jason's body for 2 reasons. Primarily, to prove the case of murder. There's been very few convictions or murder convictions where a body hasn't been recovered. And secondly, for the family, so they could have closure on the case.
At the same time, psychic Sue Evans has launched her own search. She claims that she is in touch with the spirit of Jason, and he has given her clues that will lead to the location of his body.
Where we were in terms of the jigsaw at this stage was that we had more pieces to put together to build the whole picture. We needed to know where the body might be to help find Jason.
Jason's sister is convinced by Sue's powers and asks the police to use her supernatural skills. But in the UK, busy murder investigation teams often discount the work of psychics. While Sue and Julie embark on their own hunt for more clues, the police act upon Sinfield's admission that he helped Davis dispose of the body.
Following Richard Davis killing Jason Williams, they wrapped his body up in black plastic bags. And he and Sinfield went around the Brecon Beacons looking for a place to dispose of Jason's body.
Assigned this near impossible task of finding Jason's body in over 500 square miles of moorland is search expert John Williams.
The area is so big. Unless we had some indication as to where Jason was, then we were literally clutching at straws.
What the police have that Sue doesn't is the help of one of the men who dumped Jason's body.
We drove quite a few hundred miles over the days I was with him. I can recall him saying that they drove onto a grass verge at some point. And on my left-hand side, I could see some tyre marks that were on the grass verge. I looked further along the road from where the tyre marks were, and I could see a white bag. On top of the bag, there was a stone. And it just seemed strange. This was in the middle of nowhere. There was absolutely nothing about, and why is a stone suddenly being put on top of a carrier bag?
Sue's psychic investigation has already shown her Jason's body dumped on the Brecon Beacons. Will her visions of Celtic crosses and a broken tree turn out to be meaningful?
The first thing I saw at this point, I could see that this area was flattened, and that was quite obvious. You could then see the tree trunk here, and you could see that some bark was removed from the main sort of trunk area. It just looked as if somebody put their foot in it. I was more than satisfied that this was a scene, more than satisfied.
As Sue predicted, it seems that Jason has been dumped near a broken tree. Now police meticulously search for his body or further evidence.
It was literally a shoulder-to-shoulder, slow-time search from the roadway into where I felt Jason was placed.
We'd heard that they'd actually sealed off an area in Brecon and forensic teams were searching it.
For 12 hours, police search experts painstakingly examine an area that is almost the size of a football pitch. Miraculously, they discover a human hair.
He came up trumps because his hair was found interwoven with grass and bracken. For that particular scene, to find his hair was fantastic.
I think at that point we were hoping that they would find him.
The hair is sent off for DNA testing to secure a match with Jason. After 24 hours of searching, the police are forced to acknowledge the worst.
There was no body. I carried a cursory search, but there was no body.
It was quite frustrating, really, when they came away empty-handed.
Amazingly, Sue's vision of the broken tree has turned out to be accurate, but somebody has been back to the site and Jason's body is gone. Without it, a murder conviction is a near impossible task for the police. Over the following months, the police scour the Brecon Beacons using helicopters, dive teams, and sniffer dogs, every method available to them, except the powers of a psychic. Julie believes that where the police have failed, Sue will succeed.
I feel it's definitely near these 3 Celtic crosses. So we decided to go in the car and go up and have a look for ourselves to see if we could find any of these landmarks that Jason was showing us.
As we were driving along, we rounded a corner and I spotted a church behind some high sort of conifer trees.
And we found a Celtic cross. There was a Celtic cross there.
And as we approached it, I noticed that I could just see a Celtic cross in the grounds, and I said to Sue, there's one Celtic cross there.
Julie turned on and said, look behind, and there was 2 other Celtic crosses. So these were the 3 Celtic crosses we felt that Jason was showing us. The clues and the jigsaws were coming together, and we just had to trust that he'd guide us to him.
In South Wales, 2 very different investigations race to find the body of murder victim Jason Williams. The police search the Brecon Beacons but find no corpse. Jason's sister Julie turns to psychic Sue Evans. She is certain that Jason will be found near the 3 Celtic crosses. crosses that they have discovered in an old Welsh churchyard.
The fact that we actually found 3 Celtic crosses in one churchyard, which I think is quite unusual anyway.
You could feel his spirit around you, and you would feel a nice warmth.
I thought about it, and I really can't think how logically she could come up with as much accurate information as she has.
I would never have known these were here, and I do feel that Jason did draw us towards these to show he's in this area.
Sue is certain that Jason is nearby. Julie supplies the police with the psychic's vision, but they prefer not to act on information allegedly from beyond the grave.
So I'm used to them being skeptical. I'm used to not being acknowledged by some of them, even when what I've set out to do has happened. But I feel Julie did feel a lot of frustration because she'd be going there and saying, well, look, we're doing this, we're doing that, why aren't you helping?
The police have the confession of Sinfield and strong evidence pointing towards Davis as the murderer. But without Jason's body, taking Davis to court is risky. A conviction secured without a body is virtually unprecedented.
My understanding that there's been less than a dozen convictions in British judicial history, or it was at that stage, for a conviction of murder without a body. So we were mindful of that.
The police meticulously piece together a package that aims to prove that Jason is dead even without his body. It includes vital information from the crime scene.
We got an interpretation to the blood. There was a large pool of blood, so anyone who would have lost that amount of blood would have been seriously ill at that particular time. So that helped to support the fact that Jason Williams didn't leave the scene that night.
The hair discovered in the forest comes back with a DNA match with Jason. What Sinfield was saying all along seems to be true. Then detectives interview Davy's girlfriend, Jody Sinfield, and she confirms that he admits to stabbing Jason. The police decide to gamble on the skills of their forensic team, and in February 2002, Davis and Sinfield are put in front of a court of law. Sue's claims that she has spoken to the spirit world will also be put to the test.
It was spooky, for want of a better word. As I say, when certain things were coming up, you could actually feel the hairs on the back of your neck going up.
Julie claims that Sue continued to provide her family with visions of the murder, including details of the part that Davis played, the nature of the attack, and how Jason's body was moved. Now this information corresponds with what Julie hears in court.
They realised that a lot of the information that I'd given them was accurate, bang on. This proved that I was on the right track all the way through. Julie did go back to see the police and say, well, Sue had told us all this before it came out, and yet you still refused to let her in on this.
The thorough police investigation leaves no room for doubt. Sinfield gets 2 years for perverting the course of justice. Richard Davis is found guilty of Jason Williams' murder and sentenced to life. He continues to appeal against this judgment.
We were satisfied and pleased, obviously, with the fact that we had done a thorough investigation. But my thoughts are with the family of Jason Williams.
It's over 4 years since the trial. Jason still has no grave. His grieving family can only pay their respects at a memorial near the site where he was originally dumped.
Jason seems to have accepted things a lot better as the years have gone on. He seems to have a little bit more acceptance of what's happened to him, but the drive is just as strong. He still wants us to find his body. He's still around us, and he is only a thought away, and he pops into my mind quite often, quite regular.
Sue is certain that Jason is near the 3 crosses, and with police help she could find his body, but the controversy over the intervention of psychics and clairvoyants in criminal investigations remains.
Well, I feel that psychics are another tool that the police can use. I would like to see every police headquarters having psychics on their books.
It's nice to see Callum's dog is still here.
Oh, bless.
Yes, Callum's little dog. Because obviously he has no grave to go to.
No. It's a little present for his father.
Mm. I think she's been psychic from a child. To her, that is normal, and I get the impression she can't understand why we find it so amazing, because for her, it's fact.
Sue's relationship with Jason has had a lasting effect on her.
It proves that there's life after death, and it proves that your loved ones care for you after they've died, and that they still have emotions and feelings even though they're dead. I will always keep looking for him, and I will always be there for him for as long as I can.
November 1982. Fear cloaks the serenity of a small town in New Jersey. Popular teenager Amy Hoffman has disappeared without a trace. The police can't say if she's alive or dead, but psychic Nancy Weber knows there's been a murder and fears the killer is on a rampage.
He's killed before, he's killing again. He's going to kill more.
She tells me something, I believe it to be gospel.
Can Nancy help catch the killer before his brutality is unleashed again? Three people out for a pleasant afternoon stroll, or so it seems. A closer look, and it becomes apparent this is not a recreational time filler. These people are not so ordinary. The conversation underscores the seriousness of their purpose.
She's screaming for her life and begging mercy.
Right when she was first found, there was no evidence that would indicate a...
Bill Hughes is a police officer, Nancy Weber is a professional psychic, and Jimmy Moore is retired. He was detective captain at the Parsippany Police Department. More than 20 years ago, the trio came together and stood in this secluded location. What happened here would change their lives forever. November 23, 1982. Amy Hoffman, an 18-year-old senior high school student, leaves her part-time job at a Morris County shopping mall. In the parking lot, she says goodnight to her friend. It's approximately 9:35 p.m. Two people see Amy as she walks across the back lot to where her car is parked. One, a fellow worker driving out of the parking lot. The other, her killer.
Well, her vehicle was found in the parking lot, not too far away from the store that she worked in. And the door was open on the car, and there was a witness, and she noticed a white male, in a green Chevrolet that was parked a couple spots away from where Amy's car was. And he was just sitting there in the car at that time.
It's Thanksgiving, 2 days since Amy Hoffman was last seen alive. Morris County, New Jersey comprises several small townships. Police departments from across the region become involved in the search for Amy.
It had a major impact on the community. Women were hesitant about going out on their own, especially at night.
20 miles away in Mount Olive, Nancy Weber, who runs her own psychic practice, gets a phone call from a woman.
She said, my daughter has a best friend who works at the Morris County Mall. And she's missing. She didn't come home. And that's when the vision popped up. The image I kept having was this naked body, multiple wounds all over. She was lying in water, raped. She had been terribly, terribly violated before she was murdered. And so I just went right into saying to her, I am sorry. I really can't discuss this with you. You call Amy's parents, or you call the police that are involved.
That same day, Amy Hoffman's body was found in a retention tank at the reservoir in Randolph.
There was a couple walking their dog through the woods, and it's an isolated area. It's like a lover's lane area. And they came across the body floating in the water. There was numerous slashes and stab wounds to her body, and some were post-mortem, meaning that after she had died, the assailant still continued to slash at her and cut her body. It was pretty gruesome.
Nancy's vision of the dead young woman was accurate. Bill Hughes, a detective with the Mount Olive Police Department, happened to drop by Nancy's house.
Most of the police officers in Mount Olive Township knew Nancy because she was just a friend of a lot of guys on the force, her and her family. And I stopped by Nancy's house just for a cup of coffee.
By the way, I read the newspaper account of Amy Hoffman. Why are they lying? She was raped. She wasn't not sexually abused. She was mutilated, not no wounds obvious.
The investigators at the time did not believe that sexual assault had occurred, but Nancy said that it had, that the girl had been sexually assaulted. There was no way of knowing because there was no physical evidence that you could see at the scene, according to the investigators, to indicate any type of sexual contact. What we found out later on was, yes, she indeed had been sexually assaulted by the suspect, and that was the result of forensics taken by the medical examiner's office.
I didn't say anything to Bill about wanting to be involved at all. It's one of the things I don't ever do. I wait to be asked. When it comes to this kind of work, it's very important, I believe, for all concerned, including the victim, to know that I am the appropriate person to participate. It's an ingredient. I'm one of the ingredients or not. So I don't ask to help.
Maybe to a lesser extent today, but at that time, psychics were certainly not taken seriously. They probably were looked at as people trying to make a name for themselves, people that would take advantage of the weak. I was a small player in this investigation. I'm on the periphery, so I really had no authority. I had to find somebody that was very open-minded, kind of like myself. You know, I'll try anything once, believe anything once until it's proven wrong.
Detective Bill Hughes has faith in Nancy's psychic powers, and she has a real concern that the killer will strike again.
He's killed before, he's killing again, he's going to kill more.
November 1982, Morris County, New Jersey. 18-year-old student Amy Hoffman goes missing. 2 days later, her mutilated body is discovered in a water retention tank. Police from all across the region are hunting down a brutal killer. On the same day Amy's body is discovered, psychic Nancy Weber has a vision of the crime scene. She knows that the young woman has been sexually assaulted and murdered even before police. Now she suspects the killer will strike again. She's right.
The second victim was a girl named Deidre O'Brien, who worked in a local restaurant and was heading home early in the morning. It was after midnight. She was forced off the road and abducted from her vehicle, and later brought to a rest stop on Route 80 in Warren Township, where she was murdered. We were all very upset because now we had two gruesome homicides on our hands, and we had a feeling that the same individual was involved because the same type vehicle was seen leaving the scene of Deidre O'Brien's homicide.
A second woman dead in such a short time leaves little doubt that police are dealing with a serial killer. But this time, the killer leaves a calling card: tire prints. Detective Bill Hughes thinks it's crucial to get Nancy officially involved in the case, but he is just one of hundreds of police officers tracking down what they now suspect is a serial killer. He needs to get someone he can trust to hear her out.
I knew that Jimmy Moore is a seasoned veteran. Jimmy has well over 20 years on the police force at the time. He's a captain. He's in charge of the detectives in Parsippany. He's more directly involved in the case because Amy Hoffman is from Parsippany. So I knew that if I could talk to Jim, then I might be able to get them to use Nancy to do some investigative leads on the case or to give us some direction to go in the case.
I had never used a psychic, and I was a little skeptical. I really didn't believe too much into them. Is it possible? I mean, can somebody truly do this? I actually had flashbacks of being on the boardwalk and down at the Jersey Shore, and you see these signs, palm readings, and of course I don't believe in any of that. So I was a little skeptical, but I said, you know what? We have nothing really to go with. If there's a chance that it's going to solve the case, I'm willing to try it.
When I opened the door to Bill at 6'5", standing next to this about 5'7" man who he introduces as Captain Jimmy Moore from Homicide, I thought, uh-oh, what now? And he simply asked me to repeat to Jimmy what I had told him about the newspaper account of Amy Hoffman and my belief that there was a discrepancy there.
I asked Nancy some questions and stuff like that, and pretty much wanted to get to know her as an individual. And I found out that she was a just down-to-earth type of individual, and she didn't seem to be a person that exaggerates or puts anything on. And I was impressed by her personality. And I said, how do you do this? And she says, I just see it. And she says, I don't know why or how, but I just see things. And she says, all I can do is tell you what I see. And she says, I don't want you to tell me anything about the case, and I don't want you to give me any leads.
What we decided to do at that point was take a ride in my car. And what we were going to do is take Nancy, by the scenes of the abduction, and the scenes of the murder, and the scenes where their bodies were left.
When I was driving with Bill and Jimmy in the car the first day, when we went down a road, I could feel I was coming towards the end of her life. It was as if the energy of the road itself got darker and darker. Got more magnetically charged with an energy that felt more panicky, heightened anxiety.
The first place that we went to was the reservoir in Randolph. We took Nancy down there and parked the cars, and we let Nancy walk around. It was an eerie feeling. You know, it was a very isolated area, wooded area, no homes around. Very macabre. You could almost feel the horror that Amy would have gone through. Amy could have been dumped in any one of about 12 acres. And Nancy went right to the spot where Amy was left.
I felt almost as if Amy was waiting for me there on the ground. So I got down on the ground on my knees, and I could feel no separation between the memory of what Amy went through and myself at that point. I began to speak words I believed were the last words, where she was begging, please don't kill me. I believe she knew that that's what he was about by then. She had already been raped. She had already been badly cut. And I believe she understood that he was enjoying this. And she didn't know how to get through to him. She had no idea how to get through to this person who seemed bent on destroying her. For me, it was very important to stay with it because I'm looking for the tiniest bit of a clue, a shred of evidence that might stop him. Went back in the car and kept reviewing. Now I'm going over all the film. Again and again, like an editor, attempting to be as detailed as possible. Pop. He's from Polish descent. He grew up in Morristown. Pop. He was in Florida. He was in jail there. for murder. And I'm telling Jimmy and Bill as I get it, in the car, driving. They let him out. Early parole? Pop. His name kept coming to me, the man who was with her. James. I don't know if she knew his name. I knew it. So when I got the last name beginning with a K and Kadababaich.
I felt that Nancy was seeing what we were looking for. She had this individual pegged, and she was trying as hard as she could to give us as much evidence that she could see to arrest us, to arrest him, because she kept telling me, Jim says, this guy is sick, and he's just going to keep killing until he's caught. And she was upset with that. She was very adamant about telling me that this was a sick individual and he's just going to keep on killing.
It wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't he stalked this particular person for weeks and had an obsession with her. He had an obsession with joy at causing harm. When I saw that, I knew he's not going to stop until somebody stops him. This man will not stop.
With 2 brutal murders occurring within 10 days, every available police officer in Morris County is on the case. Most are following procedure, the routine that is police work. 2 are following a totally different line of inquiry. Detectives Jimmy Moore and Bill Hughes have teamed up with psychic Nancy Weber in their own private investigation. They've been able to get quite a bit of information from Nancy about the first murder. Now they want to know what she can tell them about the second.
After the Deidre O'Brien homicide, I picked up Nancy and we drove to the rest area where the crime had taken place.
She took us right to the spot where the suspect had parked with Deidre. She described the encounter there.
And I see this truck in my mind. And I see a trucker, and I see this woman coming out of a speeding car. She's naked. She's knifed. And I'm looking at the car, and I'm looking at her. It's the same car. It's James. I know it.
The only thing that stopped him from continuing with his attempt to sexually assault her was the fact that there was a truck parked in the rest area a little ahead of them.
Nancy felt that the assailant had just had enough and didn't want to be bothered with her anymore, so he stabbed her and threw her out of the car and then drove off. And that's when Deidre had enough strength to pick herself up and go to the truck to knock on the door, getting help from the truck driver.
The truck driver got on the CB radio and radioed for help, and troopers eventually got there, but unfortunately, Deidre passed away in the arms of the truck driver.
I was impressed with Nancy when I took her to the truck stop, because everything that she was telling me was exactly what had happened, as much as we knew from the evidence and from the truck driver's statement.
She's telling us stuff that there's no way Nancy could have known, because this is, you know, in the investigative files. This is not stuff that's being released to the press. And yet, Nancy knows what happened.
Over the next few days, Nancy keeps replaying the visions over in her head.
Every time I would go back to James, I would get another tiny little piece. He was at least about 5'10", slim, very narrow, thin, long nose, dark eyes. And I'd spend hours on it. I would be reviewing it, kind of like 18-hour days of review editing. Then I'd go back some more, and I'd feel the car, his brother, gas station. Brother owns it, works it. That's where he got the car, from his brother at a gas station. They're local. They're Wharton, they're Morristown, they're local. They all know who he is. Everybody knows who he is. Don't know his last name. He was a local terror. Growing up even, the cops all know who he is. He's not an unfamiliar character. This guy was dangerous when he was in high school.
Nancy's coming up with all this stuff that she couldn't have possibly known about, and she's given us all this good information. And then a little bit of frustration sets in because you believe what she's saying, and now you're trying to think to yourself, how am I going to convince the bosses in Morris County to listen to what she has to say?
At this stage, the detectives want permission from the county prosecutor to officially involve Nancy in the investigation, but before they can present their case, they are denied access to his office. The prosecutor is not interested.
As Nancy and I started to walk through the door, a detective from the prosecutor's office stopped me, and who knew me personally, and he said, "Jim, what's she doing here?" I said, "Well, she's been with us and giving us information on the case." And he said, "Well, the prosecutor doesn't want her here. He doesn't want to get involved with her." I was upset with the prosecutor for not even hearing us out. I felt that he should have at least listened to what we had to say. And it bothered me. To this day, it bothers me why he did that.
The headlines were all over not only our state, but the nation and on all the news, that we had a serial killer. Nobody knew who it was. They couldn't figure it out.
Nancy is also upset and frustrated. She decides to appeal to a higher authority. She calls some students who she trusts, and they form a psychic circle. Together, they use psychic prayer to try and stop the killer in his tracks.
Went through everything. And when I was finished, I told them, join hands with me. So we went to the light, went to the Godhead, went to the apex, and through that, asked that if it was in the spiritual path of all concerned, to bring back to James K. Itch the pain he has given and the suffering he has caused. Let him feel it now. Let him get it in such a manner he can no longer give it. And I simply held on to that thought the rest of the night. It was my mantra. It was my chant. It is his time. Let him feel his own pain. He cannot give it out any longer. Let him feel his own pain. He cannot give it out any longer. It is over.
The power of divine intervention has been argued and disputed since time began. Can a New Jersey psychic's prayer really stop the killer in his tracks? In fact, there's been a dramatic break in the case overnight.
I get a call home, and I was told that an individual was arrested in response to the Amy Hoffman, Deidre O'Brien murders. They responded to a home in Morristown where an individual had been stabbed. While they were at the scene, one of the officers noticed the green Chevrolet sitting in the driveway, and it matched the description of the vehicle we were looking for. So they called for the forensic team to come to the scene to check this vehicle out. As it turned out, they found the tire on the car matched the imprint that was found at Deidre O'Brien's abduction. And subsequently, the individual was arrested and charged with the 2 homicides. When I found out who the individual was and his background, I couldn't believe how accurate Nancy's information was that she had given us.
So we have our guy under arrest, James Kodadich, and what we find out about James is very interesting. A lot of the stuff that Nancy had told us was right on the money. James Kodadich had a brother who was a mechanic, had lived pretty much his entire life in Morris County. James had moved to Florida, had been in prison in Florida, and that he'd murdered while he was in prison in Florida, stuff that Nancy had come up with. His last name was Kodadich, the K and the ITCH that Nancy had come up with.
Early in the morning, I get a call from Jimmy, and he goes, "Hey, Nancy, what did you do?" I said, "What do you mean, what did I do?" He said, "What did you do?" I said, "I had class last night." And I told them about it. And we said a prayer to finish it. Make this man have all the pain he gave to women. He said, "Well, James Kodadich," and as he said the words and the name, it was like, boom, 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 lights go on. I went, "That's him."
All the information that she saw, that she gave us, was exactly the truth.
I think that a lot of people have to see for themselves. You know, there's going to be people that are going to watch this episode and they're going to see me and they're going to listen to me talk. They're going to listen to Jimmy Moore talk. They're going to listen to different people talking about their experiences with psychics, and they're just not going to buy it. and so be it. But if you're a police officer and you don't buy it, then you probably shouldn't be in the investigative side of anything. I says, because like I said before, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to be willing to try anything. If you try it and you don't like it and it doesn't work out for you, so be it. Then don't try it again if you don't want to, but at least try it once.
But there is still a mystery surrounding the event of James Kodadich's arrest. Police arrived at his house after he called them complaining he'd been stabbed. Could Nancy's prayer have anything to do with this?
He claimed that a dark-haired woman ran him off the road and knifed him in the back. And at the time, my hair wasn't gray, and it was longish. And I thought, I wonder if he'd recognize me if he met me. I'd love it. I'd love him to know that, you know, you stand there with all the victims. And that victims have power, you fool. How could you do this?
It's up to you to decide whether she had anything to do with it or not.
On October 29, 1984, James Kodadich became the first man sentenced to die under New Jersey's revised capital punishment statute. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. After his arrest, it was determined that Kodadich had actually stabbed himself. He never explained why, although the self-inflicted wounds were not life-threatening, and apparently he never again spoke of the long-haired woman he claimed had attacked him. But perhaps he sees her now and then. December 1984, Cumru Township, Pennsylvania. The body of a strangled woman is dumped in a ravine. For 20 years, the case of Jane Doe lies dormant until a cop and a psychic join forces.
I started to see lines of light across a map, and I saw the Brooklyn Bridge.
Can a psychic's map locate a killer and solve a 20-year-old murder? Cumru, a small township in rural Pennsylvania. The solving of the Jane Doe case began in an unorthodox way, with an inquiry into the unrelated homicide of a local man. Murder is an unusual occurrence in this community. More unusual is the fact Detective Robert Warner, for the first time in his career, is going to meet with professional psychic Lauren Thibodeau. She has been working with the dead man's family. That's why Warner is here, hoping to find some answers.
I figured I'll use every tool I can to solve a crime. And at this point here, I figured I had nothing to lose, so let's go down and talk to Dr. Lauren and see.
Despite his optimism, Warner is not about to go advertising the visit just yet.
At that time, I didn't know how people would react, so I kept it to myself.
In fact, he didn't even tell Lauren his reason for the visit.
I didn't say anything about that case when I first walked in. She didn't even know I was a police officer. I walked in and sat down, and she knew I was there for a reading. And actually, Dr. Lauren asked me if I was in law enforcement and if I was a police officer, and I said yes.
As Warner hadn't identified himself, there's no way Lauren could have known he was a cop.
That's when she said, well, you're working on 2 cases, and one of them's very old, like put on a shelf for many years. And I was only working on 1 at the time, so I first said, no, I only have 1 case.
I said, no, there's 2 cold cases here, 2. And he said something like, well, I only have this one, but keep talking. So I did.
This lady's crazy. I'm here for 1 I can't solve. But yes, at first it was like, no way, but when you hear something like that, it's always on your mind now for the rest of the reading. You're picking your brain trying to figure out, oh, what is she talking about? What is she talking about? And then I remembered this other case that we had that I wasn't even working on. And I told her I wasn't working on that, but she said that that's going to be being worked on. Actually saw that one being solved. So at that point there, I was excited.
The second case that Lauren referred to was an unsolved homicide dating back to 1984. That year, as residents of the small community of Cumru Township prepared for the holidays, a body was dumped on the outskirts of town. Discovered 2 days before Christmas, the victim had been strangled and meticulously bound with rope. She was wrapped in a green army-style blanket and wrapped again in a paint-splattered drop cloth. An autopsy revealed that the woman was about 30 years old and had a history of abusing drugs. Forensic investigation, which was still in its infancy, revealed no clues to the killer's identity. With no means of identification, the victim was referred to as Jane Doe, a standard police procedure in the U.S. She was buried in a local cemetery. At the time Jane Doe was murdered, Lauren was a young woman at college living in a different state. Warner was blown away by the fact that Lauren had any inclination about the case.
She's talking about the two cases that we have, which floored me. For her to even say that, how does she know that we have two cases? And one's been sitting on a shelf for 15 or 20 years. And that's when I contacted her the following day.
It was in that phone conversation that I started seeing green little lights traveling across Route 78. It was as if I was looking at a map of New Jersey, New York, and eastern Pennsylvania. And as it moved across, I looked upward, sort of upward toward the Brooklyn Bridge. And I could feel, you know, and even smell the energy of the city and that we were dealing with, you know, New York.
Lauren was not only able to give a sense of place, she was also able to give some clue as to the killer's occupation.
And I remember asking Detective Rob if one of the people that they thought it might have been could have been a truck driver, because I was shown that this was somebody who would have, I kept seeing the side of a cab of a truck.
So at this point here, I thanked her and left to go with that. I still did not have the case. A few months later, my sergeant had pulled the case out and put it over on my desk and told me, you know, since you're going to be here a while, you might as well start working on this and see what you can do with it.
2 months after Lauren predicted it, Warner was assigned the Jane Doe case. The other case, the murder he went to see Lauren about in the first place, remained unsolved. But for now, Warner focused on the unidentified woman's case. Lauren had also envisioned a truck driver, and sure enough, one of the prime suspects in the original investigation was indeed a truck driver.
Back in '84, there was a truck driver that was going around picking up young ladies with reddish-brown hair, strangling them, and dumping them out of his truck. After they were able to capture the truck driver, he admitted to all the ones that he did. He said he was not in Pennsylvania. There was no way of proving he was in Pennsylvania, so we knew it wasn't him. The actual ligatures were tied differently. At that time, there was no connection.
Did Lauren get it wrong? Was her vision of the truck driver the man who had already been cleared in the case? Or was she right? Was the woman's murderer simply a different truck driver? And the big question, where was the killer right now? Cold cases are notoriously problematic. Memories fade, evidence becomes contaminated, witnesses die.
You got to understand, when the first time that this information came up, I didn't even know Jane Doe's name.
Without the victim's name, there was virtually no chance of ever nailing the killer. But there was one positive to working a 20-year-old crime. Forensics technology had come a long way in the last decade. When Detective Robert Warner started investigating a local murder in Cumru Township, Pennsylvania, he never expected to be hurled back 20 years to an unsolved homicide. Professional psychic Lauren Thibodeau predicted that Warner would be working on an old, unsolved case. Now he was. The case of Jane Doe, a woman who had been strangled, tied up in a blanket, and dumped over an embankment.
Basically what it was it got it fired up in me. And I think my sergeant, when I came back and told him after the reading I had the first time with Lauren about the two cases and so forth, I think it kind of all just went together.
Lauren's vision of the Brooklyn Bridge clearly indicated a New York connection to the case. There was also the map highlighting Route 78, and she sensed that the murderer was a truck driver. As to how psychics see visions, they're all different.
Many people see it visually, others perceive it in a telepathic, auditory way. Others get a real gut sense, they literally have a gut clench. Many people have what I call sort of a field feeling, like from the skin out. They have, the tingles or something. So there are at least 4 different ways people perceive it.
Warner's first challenge was to put a name to the victim. The 1984 autopsy had revealed that the woman was a drug addict, 20 years on. Could this help the police find her real identity? Warner reckoned there was a reasonable chance that she had a criminal record. If that was the case, her fingerprints would be on file. APHIS is the national database of all criminal fingerprints. It didn't exist when the woman was murdered in 1984. Warner submitted her fingerprints, and sure enough, she had been arrested on a minor drug offense.
Match gave me Margaret Calciano and Margaret Gravasi. Gravasi was Margie's married name. She was married for about a year in the 70s. So with those 2 names at that point, I have a computer system where I can go in and I can type in the names in the certain states. And I typed in Brooklyn, New York, and typed in her married name, and I didn't come up with anything. I come up with a few Gravasis. I tried calling, and no one knew Margie at that point. So then I took her maiden name, which was Calciano, entered that in to my system, and came up with probably 250 names in Brooklyn. And the first name I called was her mother.
He says, do you have a daughter named Margaret? I says, yes. I said, who's calling? And he says, I'm a detective from Pennsylvania. And he says, I hate to tell you this, Miss Calciano, but we found your daughter in 1984. And I says, okay. I says, what do you mean found her? He says, well, she was murdered.
For 20 long years, Joan Calciano lived the fear and dread only a mother can comprehend. The sheer horror of never knowing if her daughter was alive or dead. Now, finally, the wait was over.
It was a relief because at least I knew, I knew in my heart she wasn't alive, but I didn't know where she was. And a lot of things go through a mother's mind, and I just thank God she was cut up and never been found, or buried and never been found, and just so many things went through my mind. But I miss her, She was such a beautiful girl. She could have had anything in life. Yeah, but that was it.
Here's a woman who lost her daughter 20 years ago. And she said the last time she saw her was December 19th, 1984. And she got into an argument with her, slapped her on the face, and she ran out the door, and that was the last she saw her. And it haunted her ever since that was the way her and her daughter split.
The next day, Warner and his partner drove to Mrs. Calciano's apartment in Brooklyn.
She welcomed us in, and there were friends and family members there, and we sat around the kitchen table. And we showed her photos just to make sure that she could ID and say that, yes, that's my daughter. We showed her photos from the autopsy.
You know, and we had to ID it, and it was her. And it was hard, you know, to identify her.
And then we got down to brass tacks, and we asked them who was involved in this.
He asked me if I had any idea who killed her, and I said yes. And I gave him the guy's name.
With this information, could Warner find the killer? For almost 20 years, the file on an unidentified female murder victim lay dormant. The Cymru Township Police Department had reached a dead end until Detective Robert Warner met with professional psychic Lauren Thibodeau. Spurred on by Lauren's visions, and with some good old-fashioned police work, Warner was able to identify the woman as Margie Calciano. Margie's family were able to identify who they thought was her killer.
All of them said without a doubt Peter, and they gave us the last name of Iosa. Peter was last seen with her. He was, from what the family at that time had told us, he was fatally attracted to her. He would get upset if she was with someone else. He was quite older than her. He was 20 years her senior.
He was obsessed with my daughter, and I knew that he had killed her because he disappeared the same day she did, and that was December 19th.
He supposedly was a very hothead. He would snap, and he slapped her around before.
She was doing coke, and he was giving her money to buy it. And when she needed money, you know, he gave it to her. And he swore nobody would ever have her, you know, and he made sure of that. Yeah.
So we kind of had a good feeling that he was a good suspect. When we left, we just didn't know how to find him. We returned back to our station the following day, and I started working on it, and I couldn't find the last name of Peter Iosa anywhere in New York. I couldn't find it anywhere in the United States.
According to the Census Bureau, there are 555,864 Peters living in the United States. All Warner has to do is find the right one. And all he has to go on are Lauren's visions. A truck, the map with the beam of light, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Warner calls Lauren.
I remember talking to him by telephone not long after about this situation and getting that very visual movie feeling. As he was describing things that he knew about this case, I began to see imagery of a truck driver. Not a big guy, this one. I didn't get a sense of big hulking. You know, on the slender side, definitely a smoker. And I remember seeing the white door of a truck opening, and as if I was looking over the shoulder of the driver stepping out. A thickly quilted sort of plaid, like a thick flannel shirt that you might wear instead of a coat in wintertime. Definitely felt like winter to me. It was very clear that we were at a crisp, cool, almost like could smell lake water near it. And we were at a truck stop somewhere near water. And I guess in this case it would have been the Great Lakes. That region would be on the way. It's almost like a psychic profile of him. I do feel he's a repeat killer. Certainly a lot of sexual violence, you know, rape, assault, that sort of thing.
The revelation that this might be the work of a serial killer, as opposed to a one-off crime of passion, upped the ante for Warner. He was now in a race against time.
We have to get him. We need to get him off the street. If he's killed once and he's going to do it again, and how many has he done in between? It's like any law enforcement officer, anyone actually, that, you know, you want to get this guy off the road, off the streets. He's a danger. There's not a female around that's safe as long as he's out there.
In an attempt to get Pete's last name, Warner phoned Joe Drezek, an ex-boyfriend of Margie.
And he said that he didn't know the name, but he knew that Pete had filed a complaint against him one time, and that the police may have it on record if they'll find it from way back then. So at that time, I contacted New York PD, gave them the information that I had, and they were able to come up with a report and fax it to me in a couple of days, and it came back with Peter Williams.
Warner used Williams' social security number to track the fugitive. He discovered Williams was drawing welfare checks in Milwaukee, and he had been a truck driver, just as Lauren had predicted. One of his main routes had been Brooklyn to Wisconsin, which would have taken him past the Great Lakes. Once again, Lauren's visions proved to be uncannily accurate. With Lauren's help, Warner has gotten this far. He has a name, Peter Williams, and a face. But has he got the hard evidence needed to convict the man he believes murdered Margie Calciano? At any given time, there's well over 20,000 women missing in the U.S. Margie Calciano was just another statistic, and for 20 years, she didn't even have a name. Were it not for the collaboration of Detective Robert Warner and professional psychic Lauren Thibodeau, the chances are Margie would have faded into history as an unidentified victim. The combination of psychic intervention and solid conventional police work produced a prime suspect, Peter Williams.
When I first met Pete and I walked up to him, I advised him who I was and the reason why I wanted to talk to him, and the blood drained from his face. You could see him just literally turn white. He was just pale and became quite nervous. He said the last time he saw Margaret took her to a methadone clinic, and she got out of the car and that was the last he saw her. And he said he washed his hands of her. And those words, when he said I washed my hands of her, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He said he didn't deny being intimate with her, but what he did deny was killing her.
Warner needed more than suspicion to nail Williams. He needed hard evidence, and he had it. When he took on the case, all the evidence was resubmitted back to the lab. Improved forensics technology revealed a single hair embedded in the army blanket used to wrap Margie. To prove it belonged to Williams, he needed to get a DNA sample.
He felt like he had that licked because he wasn't denying having sex with her. What he was denying was killing her. So he was willing to give us the DNA samples. He didn't know we had the hair at that point. And after the fact, prior to leaving, I basically had told him flat out that we felt he's the one that did this. We knew that he probably wouldn't stay in Milwaukee long, and he didn't. He left a few weeks after we were there.
The DNA analysis proved positive. The single hair embedded in the blanket that encased Margie Calciano matched the DNA sample taken from Williams.
When we arrested him in Tucson, he looked at it. He didn't say a whole lot. He didn't say he wasn't guilty at that point. What he said was he read the probable cause and saw the hair. And I think that's what floored him. I think he realized that he had it at that point.
The DNA profile of the hair recovered from the green blanket matched the DNA profile of Peter Williams. Based on your affiant's investigation, information that your affiant has received in the DNA profile results which were received from mitotyping technologies matching the recovered hair from the green blanket wrapped around the victim and the DNA profile of Peter Williams, I am requesting an arrest warrant be issued for the suspect, Peter Williams.
You do what you had to do. Huh? Couple of mistakes.
Well,
I'm saying a couple of mistakes.
Peter Williams was charged with first-degree murder and taken back to Pennsylvania. A month before he was due to face trial, Williams died of cancer. Once again, he had cheated the scales of justice.
I wish we could have gone to trial because I would have rather him been found guilty by a jury. It would have been better for the family and friends that way. It would have been a definite closure.
I felt I was cheated when he killed her. and not knowing where she was all those years. And then I wanted to see his face in the courtroom. I wanted him to see me, and which I felt I got cheated again, you know, and it was hard. I mean, I felt very bad. I broke down and cried because I didn't want it to go that way. I wanted him to see me, but it didn't work. So naturally, I felt I was cheated again, you know.
When Margie Calciano had been positively identified, at the request of her mother, her body was exhumed. Today, she is buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, just blocks from her mom's home.
And it was funny because when we were up in Brooklyn, we're sitting, and I'm looking at the Brooklyn Bridge, and that's when it dawned on me, and I started thinking about all the things that Dr. Lauren told me that fit. Even though prior to that, it didn't sink in and I wasn't using it. But after I sat there and thought about it, I thought, okay, the Brooklyn Bridge, I just went down the line and all the pieces started fitting in.
I think where people get stuck is that it's psychic and it must be somehow bigger or more magical than something else, and it's not. It's just a different way of getting information.
You'll get bits and pieces of information. It's all fragmented. And what you have to do is, it's like a puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And you have to sit down and try and place these things into your case. Once you sit down and you can pop in all the pieces, you'll solve your crime.
I would say the best attitude for success is one of very practical, if this can help me solve a case, I'll use it, right? It should be seen as a tool, not as a solution to a case. Psychics do not solve the crimes. The police do that. Where we have help, I think, is sorting out the wheat from the chaff.
Would we have solved the case if I didn't go to Dr. Lauren? It's kind of strange how things work. It's like it's meant to be, you know? It's like things happen for a reason.
Every suspect is innocent until proven guilty. Because Williams died before going to trial, nobody can say for certain if Peter Williams killed Margie Calciano. And there's another twist to the story. Again, because there was no trial, authorities are not allowed to submit Williams' DNA to the national database. So other police officers trying to solve other cold cases will never be able to cross-check Williams as a suspect. So we may never know for certain if and how many times he killed. School's out, and 14-year-old Rachel Domas is running late. She misses her bus and starts the 3-mile walk home. She never makes it. Although there's no evidence of foul play, the pressure is on Detective Gary Miko to find the girl quickly.
Didn't have a crime. We didn't have a victim. We didn't have evidence of anything.
But psychic Nancy Weber claims to see a crime unfolding.
I know he's the killer.
Can the rookie cop and the seasoned psychic team up to find the missing girl? Long Valley, New Jersey, the sort of place where no one locks their doors, a safe place to raise a family. So when 14-year-old Rachel Domas misses her school bus and doesn't return home, police don't immediately fear the worst. Her parents have called the police to report her missing, but the most likely explanation, Rachel is just out with her friends and has forgotten to check in with her parents.
Phone rings, and it was the vice principal of the high school, who I had a rapport with, who I knew quite well, asked me what we were doing about the missing girl. I believe 2 or 3 of her girlfriends were in his office at the time, and were encouraging him to give us a call to try and find out what happened, because they knew her and she wasn't that type of a girl.
The call from the principal disturbs Miko. He goes straight to Rachel's home to meet with her parents.
You had the immediate sense that something was wrong. The parents know their children well, and they're telling you something's wrong, then something's wrong. I remember seeing a photo of her on a wall. I recognized the face. The previous year, she was in grade school, and she walked to school, and we had a school post where we crossed kids in the morning and then crossed them again in the afternoon. So there's a definite human factor that comes into play, and also just knowing her personality as little as I did, I couldn't imagine her as a person who would run away from home. Walked into her bedroom, looked for any kind of luggage missing, clothing missing, a note, any sign of her running away. And everything was intact. The only thing missing were the clothes that she wore to school that day and her books.
Across town, psychic Nancy Weber's phone rings. It's a friend of the missing girl's family, and the woman is frantic.
Oh my God. This girl, Rachel, who lives down the block from us, hasn't come home from school. She's missing. I'm listening to this voice. And as I listen to the voice, images start flashing before me. I hear the scuffling, and I know it's leaves, and I know the smell of it is woods. I hear his voice. I see his eye wandering. I don't see his whole face. The smell of him, it's a smell of autos and gasoline, and everything moves very quickly, like rushing torrents of film, and that's why I have to go back over it and slow it down.
Nancy envisions a young woman, but she's not sure if it's the missing teenager.
And what can I do to confirm the image I have? Because I had an image of a girl, a photo. So I said to her, listen, do you have a photo of her? I can get her yearbook. Okay, so I'll put the woman to work, and I'll be able to see if the photo matches what I see in my mind.
Meanwhile, Detective Miko is totally unaware of Nancy's visions. All he knows is a girl has gone missing, and yet somebody, somewhere, must have seen her.
What I needed to do is try and find someone that saw her. If she missed the bus and she was walking, let's try and track down some witnesses that saw this person, our missing person, walking from the high school, that few-mile walk to her home. And that was my goal.
Rachel's route home would have taken her past a busy service station. Miko heads straight there.
Most people aren't home during the week, during the day. So let's start with someone that you know is up and down the street on a pretty consistent basis. And what I came up with was the owner of the station and several employees telling me they saw a vehicle, a green Volvo, parked up a hill off of Fairview Avenue, just off the roadway into the woods just slightly. And it was there for several hours during the course of the day. They recognized the vehicle as belonging to a former employee of the gas station, Michael Manfredonia. And he actually walked into the station that day, claiming his car broke down and needed some help. Maybe he saw her, maybe he drove past her. Maybe he was a witness. That was my hope, that he saw her. I found out that he lived in Chester Township, the next town over. And I rang up the detective there to get a little background on Michael. And he called me back and said that he was arrested for, I believe, receiving stolen property. I asked for Michael's address and wanted to stop by and visit him. He supplied that information. I hung up the phone. I was getting ready to go, and the detective called back from Chester Township, telling me that Michael was in their headquarters at the moment, just walked in and was checking on the status of his community service.
Miko is feeling lucky. He's got his first solid lead. He brings Manfredonia in for questioning. It's only been 3 hours since Miko was first assigned to the case. A gut instinct tells him that the man he's talking to might be somehow involved with the disappearance of Rachel Domasis.
He wrote an incredibly detailed statement, almost covering each minute that he was there. He tells me his vehicle breaks down. He's able to back it up a hill off the roadway, walk around for 2 or 3 hours, got back at his vehicle, started it, and drove home. How does that happen? How does that happen? And I asked if he had possibly saw this girl walking at any point in time, and he told me no, he didn't think so. I remember asking, are you sure with all that walking around that you did, you didn't see her anywhere? You didn't pass her? You didn't, when you were near your vehicle, when you were walking on Fairview Avenue? Because I understand she missed the bus, and you didn't pass by her? And the answer was no.
Miko calls in another detective for help, George Duker.
I was in a meeting, and he said, I need your help now. I need you right now. And he had some bad feelings about this missing person case, and I came to headquarters, he briefed me, and ultimately I had those same bad feelings.
20 miles away, Nancy Weber is about to have her worst suspicions confirmed by the friend of Rachel's family who had originally contacted her.
There's a knock on my door. The woman comes in. She has a yearbook in her hand. She opens to the photo of Rachel, and I look at it. I instantly know it's confirmed that the images I have, for me, match it.
Nancy is certain the girl is dead. Now she needs to convince police she can help. Every cop knows the first 48 hours in a missing persons case are critical. Evidence is still fresh, people's recollection of events still intact. It's been less than 10 hours since 14-year-old Rachel Domasis was last seen at her high school. Detective Gary Miko might have a witness, but there's no evidence of foul play. Nobody even knows if the girl is alive or dead. At the exact same time, psychic Nancy Weber has a clear and terrifying vision of the girl's plight.
And the image was a sequence of his grabbing her and repeatedly, I think, raping her, but along with the vision, the name Michael.
Weber has no way of knowing that the police have a man named Michael in custody, but she has no doubt that she has been a psychic witness to a monstrous crime. She wastes no time contacting authorities. She calls the one police officer she knows she can trust.
And I call Ross English, who was chief of detectives at Mount Olive at the time, and I worked with him on a lot of cases. I said, hey, Ross, I just got some woman who came to me who showed me a photo of Rachel Domasis in Long Valley. She's been missing since yesterday, I think. She's in the woods. He said, let me make some calls, I'll be back. I'm praying I'm wrong and that Rachel shows up somehow.
Back in Long Valley, detectives Gary Miko and George Duker are still questioning Michael Manfredonia. He's being very polite and says he wants to help, but the detectives feel certain he's hiding something.
George was a little more direct with him on trying to be clear.
We just weren't buying it up front. He was talking about how his car had broke down, and he had worked nearby in the area, and he took a walk toward Norwright Road. Just none of it really made sense. And at the same time as he's speaking, we're thinking about her possible actions as she left school that day. And the time frame and all of that just truly had us believing that this individual was involved.
And finally Michael said, I want a lawyer.
Officers have been sent to search his home and car, but they turn up nothing. In the middle of it all, Gary Miko gets a call from Ross English. He tells him Nancy Weber's horrific story.
It was sort of like, yeah, okay, Ross, I'll give her a call. And I believe I put the note in my pocket. And at some point in time, I would give this person a call. Again, I believe my job at that point was just to track down people that could have seen her, witnesses. So I didn't call this psychic back right away.
Even if Gary had called Nancy right away, there was no way they could hold Michael Manfredonia any longer.
And it was so frustrating because here we had a suspect that we truly believed was responsible for something we didn't even know yet. Certainly nothing good. But we didn't have her.
Then the real kicker. The detectives are given an ultimatum by their boss. Charge Michael Manfredonia or let him go.
12, 14 hours after he was initially picked up, we were directed to release him and take him home.
It's 3 a.m. Miko and Duker reluctantly drive Manfredonia home. They're both certain they're making a big mistake.
Gary and I got in the car and we drove him home and we dropped him off, and we just had such bad feelings about dropping him off.
And we didn't want to let it go. And there's an abandoned railroad bed that runs parallel to Fairview Avenue. And George and I, in an unmarked patrol car at 4 a.m., still drove slowly down this railroad bed, just looking for any sign, any evidence of a crime, maybe our victim walking, anything. We didn't want to let it go. And that was the last thing we did that day, that long day.
Friday morning, 8 a.m., 17 hours since Rachel Domas was reported missing. Gary Miko remembers the note about the psychic. He gives her a call.
I have a completely open mind. If a psychic has something to offer, I've got an ear.
Finally, I could say something. I needed somebody to say something to.
She said to me, I'm going to tell you something that I didn't tell the family, and I wouldn't do that. She's dead. And a boy named Michael did it.
Miko is stunned. He and Duker had a man named Michael in for questioning for hours. If Nancy is right, he had almost certainly released the girl's killer the night before and given him a ride home.
How did she know that? How did she get that? No one knew that we had a Michael in custody.
Gary appeared over the phone to be, I need this, I need more, give me more. And at the same time I heard this groan of, oh, we had him for hours here, we were questioning him.
But so far the police haven't any evidence that there's been a crime, yet Nancy claims to have seen it take place.
I am watching in-sequence event of someone, male, exploding all at once. I felt like this is somebody who had contained most of his rage to a degree and then just blew it all at once.
At the same time that Miko is talking to Weber, George Duker is leading a team scouring the area where Michael's car was last seen.
I got a radio transmission from one of the search teams telling me that they just found her pocketbook in the woods. I immediately raced from where I was to where they were and had entered into the woods. I get out of my police car, I'm running now in the woods toward the search team. They call me back again. We just found one of her shoes. I'm thinking at this point, this is tremendous. She came home from school late. She, for whatever reason, was in the woods. She tripped, she fell, she broke her leg, she couldn't get up, she couldn't get help. And then I go to the crime scene, and they're all standing there in just disbelief, looking at how he had partially buried her body. What he had done to her, the trauma of that homicide, was just unbelievable.
I was awoken by a phone call from one of our officers who was upset. They had found her body. They had found her buried, partially buried in a hole, like a big ditch, and partially covered. And I was on my way in.
I dismissed everybody, and I sat with her body, her and I, for about an hour and a half, while we got forensic people on site, and we brought them in closer and closer. On the way, checking every rock, twig, stone, branch, anything we could that might be of evidential value.
You arrive at the scene, and now what you're hoping you wouldn't have to see, you have to see. What you're hoping you wouldn't have to deal with, you have to deal with.
With the incredible accuracy of Nancy's visions in his mind, Miko knew immediately what he had to do.
Now you need to put a case together at this point in time. You need to find your suspect. Michael's your suspect. Michael's the only person so far that was put there.
We knew we then had to find him again. So it was all there. It was all there.
Gary Miko and George Duker rush to the Manfredonia home, but he is not there. His parents tell them that earlier in the day he had walked back into the heavily wooded mountainous area behind the home, but no one had seen him since. The detectives are devastated. 24 hours ago, they had a criminal but no crime. Now they have a crime but no criminal.
I don't know why he decided to just take a walk. There was no press involved in terms of her body being located.
Once again, police assemble search teams, but this time they are looking for prime suspect Michael Manfredonia.
We had dogs, tracking dogs involved, and we were unsuccessful that day, I believe it was Saturday, and didn't locate him at all on Saturday or any sign of him.
Miko replays the conversation with Nancy Weber earlier that day. She'd said the killer smelled like oil and gasoline, and that fits. Manfredonia worked in a gas station. She knew his name was Michael, and long before police had the evidence, Nancy Weber knew that Rachel was dead. Could she also hold the key to where the killer was hiding out?
And she had said to me, you know, just bring me something that he touched, that he handled, some personal belonging. And, you know, maybe that would help me, you know, tell you where he is.
I could not tell him where Michael was. I needed to make the contact with a person who had connections with Michael. And through that link, I can travel.
Before Detective Miko could officially meet with Weber, he needed permission from the county prosecutor.
You know, we never used a psychic before on anything. So this would have been a first. And clearly with a major case, you needed to get approval from at least our prosecutor's office before any of that interaction could happen.
Sometimes when I work with law enforcement, I know that I work far better with them than I work with some of the families, and that I get far more results when I work with law enforcement because they're in direct contact sometimes with the evidence, even if they didn't see the killer or know it. They've touched the evidence in some way.
And the prosecutor wasn't getting a good feeling about this at all. He didn't like that type of attention drawn to the homicide case, thought that it would get too much media, too much hype. It wasn't the direction that he really wanted to go. Gary and I then talked privately, and Gary said, "What do you think?" And I just said, "Do what you gotta do. How can it hurt? How can it hurt? She might have some information here that will absolutely, you know, turn this thing around." And he went off to see Nancy.
Gary Miko decides to defy the prosecutor and set up a meeting with Nancy. The discovery of Rachel Doma's body has turned the case of the missing girl into a full-scale homicide investigation. Prime suspect Michael Manfredonia has disappeared. Going against a direct order from the county prosecutor, Detective Gary Miko arranges a meeting with psychic Nancy Weber. He thinks she might hold the key to finding the murderer. But as he travels to meet her, doubts begin to creep in.
Was there something that she knew about this crime? Was she involved? Who knows? I didn't know. I mean, again, because of those reasons as well, it was worth meeting with her to see what she had.
And I'm driving there and I'm thinking, okay, so you're meeting somebody, you don't even know if it's Gary Miko. You've never met him before. You don't know if it's really a cop or some nut on the phone who called you. What are you doing? You're doing it anyhow, you know that. And so I have this nice discussion as I'm driving there, and I pull up alongside him, and I have a handbag, and I get in his car, and as I get in, I see the inside of the car is a cop car. He's real. And he immediately, "Can I see your handbag?" I'm thinking, okay, sure. What does he think I have, a gun?
And I'm thinking maybe a weapon. Let's make sure I'm not being tape recorded. Let's just get all this out of the way. So, you know, this person who might be a publicity seeker or some sort of a problem individual, I just want to make sure that, you know, there's some safety zone here where I'm comfortable and she's comfortable.
He hands me this wire, kind of noose-like wire. And I'm saying, it's Michael. This was his. He's used it. He wants to use it on him. He couldn't. Suicidal. It's on the other side of the mountain where he killed her. He's on the opposite side. And as I see it, and I can still picture them, there are 2 huge drums. Normally, I can't tell you, but I knew 55-gallon drums, big drums.
She said, you know, he can see you. He's up on a hill. She paused. He's groggy. He's out of it. He's overdosed on something. He's almost, you know, delirious or delusional. Or she was just talking about how he was his mindset. He's physically, he was tired. He wanted to go home. He can't go home because he knows you're there. You know, he sees police cars come and go, and so he's afraid, but he desperately wants to go home. Sometime on Sunday evening, a decision was made to place a Chester Township police officer in the Manfredonia residence, just in case Michael came home again.
And I grab a piece of paper, back of something, and I make a very rough sketch of where the gallons of drums are in a hill with pools of water.
And she said, "You're going to catch him." And she looked at me and she said, "Real soon." At that exact moment, my police radio, which had been quiet most of the night, on the police radio, you could hear that Chester Township officer on his walkie-talkie say, "All units, he's in the home now." And I said to her, "You have to leave," and sort of opened the door and kind of booted her out of the car and told her I'd be in touch and thank you. And
Gary starts the car shifting, and I jumped out of the car, and he sped away, and that was it.
as I'm racing towards the home, I'm thinking about this encounter and floored by what just happened to me.
Gary arrives on the scene just as Manfredonia is being put in an ambulance. He jumps in, reads Manfredonia his rights, and accompanies him to the hospital. Once again, Nancy Weber's prediction proved to be uncannily accurate. 72 hours after Rachel Domas was first reported missing, Gary Miko and George Duker have brought her killer to justice.
For 11 years, the 11 years that followed Rachel's death, I tried to deny emotionally what I felt about this case. Feelings of being vulnerable, feelings of being a father of daughters, feeling of, again, the same thoughts and questions I had when I sat with Rachel at her crime scene. How could this happen? How could this happen? And could we have prevented it at all? No, it's 20 years later, and it's still close under the surface. It's still there.
Nancy Weber had been right about a lot of things. Her psychic feeling that the killer was somehow connected with the smell of oil was spot on. Manfredonia was a car mechanic. The location where he was found was surrounded by oil drums, just as she had described. She was also correct about his being suicidal. Manfredonia told police that he wanted to take his own life, and he was high on an overdose of cold medicine when arrested. On Monday, September 16th, 1985, Michael Manfredonia confessed to murdering Rachel Domas in a blinding, frenzied rage. He's currently serving a life sentence at New Jersey State Prison.